Thanks for tuning into the Product Operations Summit. We really hope you're enjoying the event so far, as there's even more to come. All sessions are designed to be interactive and to give you the chance to engage with our panelists and speakers, so come ready to get involved with your questions and comments. For access to even more exclusive Product Ops content, check out PLA membership plans at productledalliance.com. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the next session. Hi everyone, and welcome back. I'm delighted to introduce our next presenter, Scott Neiman, who is from Revenera. Scott's going to be talking to us today about optimizing software product ops in a hybrid world. Scott will be taking your questions at the end, so feel free to drop them into the chat as we go along. And I'm also going to be sharing a couple more bits and pieces so you can find out a little bit more about Revenera as well. So keep an eye out for those in the chat. But without further ado, Scott, welcome to the virtual stage and take it away.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. So let me start off by sharing the presentation with you. And what we're going to be talking about is hybrid world, right? Optimizing software product ops in a hybrid world and what that's all about. If anyone can't see the presentation, let us know in the chat and someone will inform me. But let's get started. Okay, so basically what we're going to do is go around the why this whole hybrid concept is important. And one of the biggest things we're going to be talking about today, it's all about what we're going to continually refer to as insights, business insights with a single system of record. Okay, so why do we care about that, right? So a lot of companies are introducing new models, new deployment models, new license models. Almost everybody I talk to has some plans, if they're not there already, to transition to the cloud, to transition their products to SaaS-based applications. But they also obviously have to maintain their existing systems, their existing on-premise solutions, their existing license models. And so, you need a platform that allows these rapid changes without necessarily holding up the back-end processing of the order process as well as the fulfillment process, right? So the whole idea is that we want to, or you want to be able to transition to these new models without having to redo everything you've done in terms of the order process system. So you want efficiency, right? You want to be able to grow into these new systems and to integrate into the ordering process. And you also want the analytics based upon how your customers are using the products and services you're selling, right? And, the integrations to the business systems that you may have today, right? Being able to utilize those same types of systems and integrate them into, a single back end to provide business insights. And so, everyone has some type of quote to cash system today, right? Where orders are being processed and how those orders are fulfilled, how that revenue is recognized, and essentially how your customers are using their products and how they're renewing, right? Based upon the types of models that you may be presenting. And if you're introducing new products and services, if you're from a traditional perpetual on-premise base and you're moving to subscription and you start moving, even to the cloud, you don't want to have to create a new quote to cash process with each new deployment model. And we see a lot of customers actually doing this, and especially in areas where there's a lot of M&A, right? You're acquiring new products that already have existing processes and flows. And you don't necessarily want that to be a separate system, right? That you want those to be integrated so you can have a single view of data across your customers. And this is what a lot of customers that we speak to have. This is what we have as Revenera, right? I mean, we have a lot of M&A. So product line A, you could think of as products that are being acquired through M&A. They may have their own homegrown license generators. And you want to be able to utilize this technology, continuing and supporting the customers that are using it. And you may have in-house your own, like a license manager. Maybe it's some type of service you've created to distribute license to not only on-premise applications, but potentially applications in the cloud. And then if you're not there already, right, there's this emerging SaaS market where a lot of folks are taking on-premise to the cloud. And then, how is that going to manage? And you basically have a set of silos of different products, and you have to consider how those products are going to be consumed by your customers and how you're going to understand your customer insights and customer growth around the use of those products. And this is a typical quote to cash process, right? There's different components playing in different parts of these systems. For example, you have your order comes in, and basically what happens here is that, whatever CRM or ERP, CPQ system that you're using, we're going to focus a lot in on this entitlement management and licensing aspect, because primarily that's a lot of what we do, and show the benefit of this single pane of glass can bring to these new hybrid models. But what happens is an order and so the entitlement management isn't part of the order process. It feeds from the order process to do the fulfillment of those software and services. And when I say fulfillment, if it's an on-premise application, we ensure that your customers receive the software download if that's something you're distributing. Or if it's a license they need to actually activate the software or some kind of access to that software, that can be done automatically through the entitlement system. And then typically there's some type of billing, right, which is fed from that system potentially. And then on the other end, there's use, right, and renewal. So when we say use here in an entitlement system, typically in the quote to cash, is that you want some kind of data and insights to what's going on with those products and services, right? If you sell 100 licenses to somebody, you want to actually know if they're using it, and you want to know how they're using it. And that helps to aid in the renewal process, right? You want to understand the customer behavior to see if they're getting value immediately rather at the end of the renewal cycle, right? Where it's too late, right? If it's 30 days left to renew and they haven't utilized, more than 10% of the licenses they bought, most likely they're not going to renew everything, right? So this is a system, and typically, you don't want this to have variance of this system based upon the different hybrid models, right? And so on top of that, your organization may be thinking, okay, how are we going to monetize more effectively moving forward? Are we going to move from one-time basic models from perpetual to more reoccurring revenue models, where a lot of the industry is going? We see a lot going from perpetual to subscription, and even subscription to some type of consumptive or usage-based models. And these models, you'll have these slides to take a look at later, but you can see the business considerations of these models are very powerful. Subscription is obviously the most common that we're seeing in the transition process. We do see customers moving to consumptive-based models, and there's a lot of considerations to keep in mind when you're going to these more type advanced models. But regardless, right, you are going to have different product lines consuming these different models. You may be selling products that do subscription. You may be selling products that do consumptive and still perpetual. And you don't want to have to manage those in those different silos with those potentially different types of order processing, right? Because then you have different data sets that represent what your customers are doing, and you have to pull that data to try to create a 360 view of data across your customers. But it would be nice if that was all in a single system to begin with. And so that's kind of where the what comes in, right? And that's where we talk about a single system for these deployment and monetization models. So what are we actually talking about there? Well, I alluded to this, but we refer to this as a software monetization platform. And if you take a look at this, there's a lot of input vectors into this, right? So basically what the platform does, it allows your organization the ability to package your products or services around those different models that we just saw, the perpetual models, the subscription models, the usage-based models. But not only allows you to package it, but it does an enforcement of those models. So for example, if you're packaging a new model, you're moving to subscription, right? And you want to make sure at the boundary of that 1-year subscription, if that customer is still not renewed, you don't necessarily want them to continue to use that software. Or maybe you want to give them a grace period of a few weeks to get them to renew. That can actually be controlled through a monetization platform and to ensure those entitlement use rights. And you may be delivering, updates and different types of information to those customers if they're entitled to it, if they have a valid subscription or a maintenance contract. And you want to be able to easily see renewal information. Since that system has all the information about when the renewal should happen and whether that renewal has a high probability of success because you have all the analytics based upon their use of your products, that data is there, right? And that data basically can, so on the bottom right hand, you see here as an output of that is basically the usage data. And, that data can be consumed in many different ways, from existing systems you may have in-house that do BI to other ways, right? But this gives you the actual use of your products based on the products that they're entitled, that you've entitled them to. So taking a step down or a deeper dive into this, right? This kind of breaks down into the following, right? Then one of the main components to the software monetization platform is the box in the middle, right? So in the quote to cash process, you saw the entitlement system, is fed, right, from other systems. So for example, your ERP system is it continues to do what it does. The billing system continues to do what it does. Your CRM analytics tool you may have. But what it does, it interfaces to the entitlement system because the entitlement system is basically enables the enforcement of those business models you want to go to market with. And that's the key thing, right? It also allows you to manage the life cycle, allows you to get that data to understand whether your customers are getting value from the products you're selling to them. And then on the right-hand side is actually another part of the platform. That is the basically how you're getting the data, right? So you may have a SaaS application, you may have, device-based applications that's running software or desktop applications. And those applications, in one way or another, are getting what we call fulfillments, basically the right to use the software they acquired so that they can operate. And usually a fulfillment is, something as simple as a license. So in a traditional kind of on-premise application, you may have some kind of licensing SDK that is either you're loading a license into, or maybe it can call home into the entitlement system and grab it automatically. And in the SaaS-based applications, it's actually very similar, but you're not using an SDK, potentially just using a set of APIs to grant access to users based upon their responsibilities and roles. But what's happening with those use rights is managed in this central entitlement management system. So the top level benefits of that, and we'll talk dive a little bit deeper into SaaS, is that you are managing the use rights in the entitlement system, not the SaaS application. When we talk to a lot of customers making this transition to SaaS, they're not quite sure what they're doing in the on-prem world maps to SaaS. And a lot of times they go off and start building stuff. And as they start building stuff themselves, they start basically building entitlement systems inside the SaaS app. And that's a bad thing, because then you basically are breaking down, you're creating silos. You have another system you have to collect data on that's outside of your entitlement management system that you're using for on-premise applications. And now you've created a problem, as you're now having to make sure that the SaaS application knows what actually was bought and how that's managed. And if you want to change license models to do more consumptive-based models, again, it's more homegrown development. But the idea would be to leverage existing systems that you may already be using that do this already for on-premise applications, or whether it's perpetual SaaS or even just plain subscription-based on-premise applications. So you have the single back office then, and of course this is good for the data, right? For the data insights, because if we'll drill down to this a little bit deeper. But if I have a single back office system where I can report all the usage data, no matter what model or deployment model I'm selling, right, I can get a clear picture of what customers own, how they're using the different product lines, to give me an idea, what's successful, what's not successful, what's working. Or if it's like a usage model, you have that data that you can use to, push off to a billing system to create monthly bills or whatever the actual model that you're going to market with. So having this is very key. But how do you get there, right? So that's kind of the how. Do you actually just plug all these things in? Well, taking a closer look at this, right? So we talked about a lot of M&A, and we see this a lot in our industry where people are pulling in different product lines. They all have their own type of licensing technology, and to have to rip and replace all that stuff out and put in new stuff that conforms with whatever you're using as a standard today just doesn't really make sense, right? It may, in the long term, if you want to transition to newer technology because it has new features, but the most immediate need is you need to support your existing customers with the existing products. But you don't want to have that data managed elsewhere. So typically entitlement system will have hooks to plug in third-party code or license generators, right? So no matter what those products are, and no matter whether they're on-premise products or SaaS products, when they request a license, and when I say they request a license, there may be a portal interface on here that your customers log into and see the products they own, hit a button and generate a license. Or if your products have call home capability, if they're connected, they could retrieve the license automatically. Or if it's a SaaS-based application, they may just want to query the system to see what access rights have been granted to users and see what's available to grant to new users that come on board. They're basically interfacing all to the entitlement system. And then when something is reserved or when something is checked out, that record of what happened is managed in that data for the entitlement system. So as things are checked in and checked out and products are being used, that data can be collected and reconciled against the products that your customer owns. So you have a clear visibility when you start doing your reporting, when you start seeing how a new product version may be adopted amongst your customers, whether they're getting value out of it or not. There's a lot you can get through that usage data of those products. And not to get into too much of the details of this, but what we like to emphasize here is that when you are going to SaaS, I've spoken to customers. It's a bit different terminology that's being used. When you talk about SaaS, some folks don't like the term licensing. They talk about access rights. At the end of the day, it's pretty much the same thing, right? You go into the Salesforce, if you use Salesforce portal, one of the first things you see is license utilization, right? So licensing is a pretty common term actually in the SaaS world. But the problem is people don't think about they're familiar with what they do with on-prem licensing and don't know how that applies in the SaaS world, which makes sense because it applies a bit differently. But what's the same are the entitlement use rights and the distribution of those use rights. So if we're talking about, for example, keeping that, a streamlined quote to cash process, we want to reuse existing processes. What would happen is basically the products that were sold, if this is a SaaS product, would still go through the same entry order process. So there would be an order for a SaaS, and whatever your SaaS model may be, it may be based on users, it may be based on some consumptive model, right? That gets inserted into the entitlement system, which understands the monetization model, which understands the user count, right? And what it does is auto provision that information so it's immediately available to use. And that's what's represented below when we say auto provision use rights. Now that's you can think of that as a service, or you could even think of it as more of a sophisticated cloud-based license server. But what'll happen here is that basically the SaaS in what's happening in the industry that we see is that this box here is built into the SaaS application. And that's what I mentioned before, is that you're not building this in the SaaS application. You're relying on the investment in the entitlement system, much like you do in on-premise applications, right? So as immediately as the order happens, it's fulfilled and ready to use by the customer. So what an admin can do in the SaaS app is they can connect here through an API or through a portal, and start assigning, the various counts and additions they bought of the product in question to different users in the organization, right? Much like, for those of you that are familiar with assigning different roles and permissions to customers or for people in your own organization in SaaS applications, it works much the same way, but the information is maintained by the entitlement system. So that data, when something is provisioned to somebody, when they have access, when they've logged into the system, that's all there with the other data that's tied to the entitlement for the visibility and the reporting aspects of that. So it's managed in much the same way. The interfaces are all different, right? It's not SDK based necessarily. It's more API driven, REST API driven to access information and to drive the access of the users in the SaaS application. But it is a similar flow, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to show here. It's you're not changing the process. And then the result is you get something like this, or whatever your BI is, right? Is that at the end of the day, I want to know what's expiring across my user base, right? Across all the accounts, I want to see what entitlements are expiring within the next 90 days or 30 days, whatever. I want to see what needs to be taken care of immediately so I can click in and drill down to see, okay, I have 10 entitlements expiring in the next 30 days. Let me see who the customers are. Let me see who the products are. And you have that information to help in the renewal process. And you can even, for example, do something. Of course, a lot of BIs do this. If you have your own BI that wants to consume this data, it could trigger off alerts and emails to customers to let them know they need to take action on a renewal. Or since all the different products and deployment models are in the same system, you may just want a broad view over product adoption or product use, right? So I have a large portfolio of products across a bunch of different users. I want a single system to view that data. And if what folks are doing now is pulling data from all kinds of different systems we've seen to kind of create views like that. And there's a lot of overhead. There's a lot of integration points. And if you integrate it at the entitlement point to begin with, right, that data is available there and integrated to begin with. And it makes it much simpler to drill down and do analytics. You're not having to pull from many different sources to create a single view. And then, so the business considerations before we wrap up here, I mean, there's three primary ones. There's around flexibility, operation scalability, and M&A. And we talked about this. The flexibility is not so, we didn't discuss it a lot, but the idea is that you're not going to sit on a single model for the next 5 years, most likely. Everybody's moving to some kind of reoccurring model. And, variants of those reoccurring revenue models, consumption models, right? And you have to have a platform that's flexible and can also be able to, adopt itself to, other product lines, perpetual and product lines you may go to in the future with SaaS. So it needs to have that operational scalability, and it has to have that data from across those different deployment models to have that visibility to help in the customer growth. So when we say manage growth, right, if you have insights to how your customers are consuming those products, and you can find out immediately up front whether they're getting value or not from the data, you can be proactive and reach out to them. You can see, I see, you haven't consumed the licenses that you bought last month, or you're using the product in a bit different way. If you're instrumenting the application and collecting data, then we recommend, and you can recommend best practices. There's a lot of ways you can go through that. And of course, a system to do this that can integrate other disparate technologies into a single view through M&A, so that you can have that single pane of glass of reporting. So a few basic use cases, and we see what we're seeing with our customers, and this may be representative of you. One customer's actually looking at, they have a lot of M&A, a lot of systems, right? So they have, and an issue where they'd like to solve, where they want to consolidate a lot of the processes up front, right, that are doing the ordering. They want to streamline the cash to quote process all the way from CRM down. And to do this, they are also looking at an entitlement system to do the fulfillment as well as the usage management piece and the software monetization piece, being able to be flexible and move to different models. And they have an on-premise base, large on-premise base, and their future is SaaS, right? And they're trying to figure out with their SaaS product how they're going to monetize it, because they want to do some type of meter or usage-based, right? And they're not quite sure what that is. And so, using an entitlement system can give you an idea based upon how your customers are using the product, can give you some ideas of how you want to monetize, right? So you can go to market with more data. When you monetize on some meter, you'll have that data readily available in the data. And then the other one is typical that we see a lot of on-premise software vendors. They're already using an entitlement system in the process. They're using it to distribute licenses. They're using it to collect insights and data. But their next big thing is to host this application themselves, basically to have a SaaS offering. And of course, they need to maintain their existing user base, right? It's not everybody's just going to go to SaaS overnight. It's going to take years. And maybe you'll always have an on-premise base, depending on the kind of customers that you're selling to. And so they also need to be able to identify, if you remember that one slide with all the vectors coming into the platform, they want to be able to identify the different endpoints that a SaaS application is being accessed from. Because you could access the SaaS app from your laptop at work, your laptop at home, through your iPad or mobile device. And in some cases, you want to restrict that to a number of logins, right? So if you have that data, and there's ways that the monetization endpoints can do that for SaaS applications, you could monitor that and control that and restrict that if that's what you want, or not restrict it. So they needed something to be able to migrate to this type of model. So that's what they're looking to do. Okay, I know that was quick 25 minutes, I think. But yeah, that was it. And I'd like to open it up to see if anybody has some questions.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat yet, so I'll start you off with one. And right. Not to be too self-serving, but obviously, as you've presented this information to the audience, product ops folks, they work for software providers, right? And a lot of software providers think, well, we can just build this ourselves. What are some of the pros and cons of taking that approach when you're tackling something like this?
Yeah, the build it yourself, it works for the now. It gets very difficult as you grow and want to move to different models, right? So actually, a lot of the customers we deal with went down a road of trying to build their own and realized at one point that it's very difficult to do that. Plus, first, of course, you have to realize that it's not their core business. It's to do entitlement management. So their core business is whatever the core business of that software publisher. So it ends up becoming what they think is small, but becomes and evolves into quite a large beast, so to speak. And then, it has to integrate with other systems. And then if they want to now have a single pane of glass with their on-premise systems, it's more integration points that they have to build. Right, so it gets very unwieldy very fast.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Well, it does look like our time is just about up. So thanks for the great presentation. And if folks in the audience have any questions, certainly feel free to reach out after the conference, and we'll be happy to help you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Very much, Michael, and especially to Scott for that fantastic presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I have dropped a couple of links in the chat, and please do click on the blue box at the top that says find out more about Revenera if you'd like to find out more about their offerings and what they do. And you can reach out to Scott and Michael via LinkedIn as well. But thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. But thank you. Fantastic presentation, Scott.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Heather.
Thanks. Goodbye.